O suoi benio, che il fantassut descols calziva in grava a fa penachos.
That's me. I'm that little boy, barefoot, who used to go to the gravel banks and collect the plumes, white, red, colour of the sky. The memory of a game that becomes poetry and tells the story of the Magredi, the dry lands. Magredis, in the Friulan language, an ancient and unique natural environment between the Tagliamento and the Livenza rivers. A desolate and, at the same time, immense landscape, which, on a clear and serene day, can even embrace the nearby mountains, so close, like no other place in the lowlands. Within the safety network of the European Natura 2000 project, we work for the conservation and the future of the Magredi, without forgetting the once-upon-a-time stories that grandparents tell their children, rekindling old ties with nature and the traditions of the land. The story of the Magredi stops the hands of time a long, long time ago. And tells us about those impressive phenomena that convulsed our alpine landscape in the Ice Ages. At the end of each cold stage, when the temperature slowly started to rise again, the ice melted and the water, with extraordinary energy, descended from the mountains to the plains, scoring the stones and carving out narrow valleys. There were wild streams which dragged down huge amounts of rock, then abandoned it on the plain. Then the water, as it slowed down, enveloped the fragments. Smoothing them, turning them into pebbles and gravel, building almost a sort of huge stone mattress in which it could hide. Today in the province of Pordenone, from Montereale, Valcellina to Zoppola, traces of that very ancient story, written between the Cellina and the Meduna rivers, still remain. In order to understand the nature of this environment, so barren and so dry, the Ariadne thread that one needs to follow is still the water that continues to carry and to work the stones. Water that is not there, or, instead, is there. So, before hiding in that gravel mattress, water makes a journey which starts from the Friulian Dolomites, one of the wildest and most untouched spots in the whole Alpine range. From these mountains, streams are born that go down towards the plain, through Val Tramontina, the Valcellina, rapids and waterfalls, among the high walls of limestone. And lakes. where the water rests and then resumes its journey, flows onto the plain, slows down, and leaves its gravelly deposits at the foot of the mountains. Then it widens, becomes interwoven into channels, and draws curves and loops, and disappears among the rocks, flows under the Magredi, and then reappears even further down, between small streams, ditches and pools, immersed in the natural environment of the springs. Why are the Magredi, these dry meadows, so important? Because they are part of those meadows that experts describe as stable or permanent, places that no one has ever ploughed or tilled. Open spaces where animals have been able to graze. Spaces where, with time-honoured methods, men have mown the grass with scythes, respecting nature. Spaces where the only changes have been made by the flooding rivers. Thus, the natural or semi-natural grassy vegetation has remained untouched, and the dry meadows, now just a few of them remain, have become precious because they are home to often very rare plants and animals. Thus, the wild herbs, flowers, and many pollinating insects, so useful to crops and for maintaining the balance in the countryside, have been preserved and can spread into the surrounding territories. And it is important that the dry meadows, our Magredi, are preserved. Nature's rhythm and pace is slow, very slow. To recreate a meadow like that, maybe 100 years is not enough. As in a mirror, the surface of the Magredi reflects and magnifies the cycle of the seasons.
L'inverno sui Magredi è come un mio disegno in bianco e nero.
A barren, sad landscape. That recalls the steppes of old Europe. Solitary raptors perched in the trees, waiting for some prey. Red berries, swayed by the wind that moves the branches of willows and poplars. The riverbed resembles the cold surface of the moon.
Sul greto del Celine del Meduna, dove c'è la ghiaia, tutto è grande. Hai paura di perderti e ti consola andare verso i prati fioriti.
The first, at the very end of February, are the buds of the pussy willow, almost ready to open. The blackthorn open their many massed white flowers, and pollinating insects begin their work: honeybees, bumblebees, wasps. Among the stones, the wild plants, the dyer's greenweed, stock, and then the Friulian kale, discovered in the 70s, which grows only here in the Magredi, with its small, bright yellow corollas. And the orchids that bloom in May after the rains. And in the puddles of water, the toads. And in the grass, the larks, a sign and beginning of the mating season. And the partridges, quails, lapwings and stone curlews, which, after a while, will lay their eggs on the ground, hiding them in the meadows, among the rocks and stones, or in holes in the ground. And then sounds, noises and presences change in the course of the day. In the early morning, the nightingales. Towards evening, the crickets. May is also the month in which this elegant plant blooms. The fairy flax, or steppe grass, that abandons its feathery seeds to the wind.
Nei Magredi, verso sera c'è silenzio e se soffia il vento gli alberi scricchiolano piegandosi un po'. Sopra di loro gli uccelli si dondolano cantando allegri perché sono in compagnia.
When the sun is scorching, the vast expanses of grasslands change yet again. The lack of surface water increases the heat. The thin layer of fertile soil and the scarce vegetation are not sufficient to retain all the necessary moisture. The grass withers. The sun-baked stones continue to give out heat even after sunset.
I Magredi hanno l'aria molto pura. Con i ciottoli del torrente si possono fare bellissimi giochi.
Autumn. In September, with the arrival of the late summer rains, at the edge of the dirt roads that cross the grave, the gravel banks, here are the last blooms of the season. The southeastern knapweed, the autumn lady's tresses orchid, and a Tartarian bread plant. that lives only here and very, very far away, on the plains of Hungary. The ancient Pannonia, witness, perhaps, to the passage around the year 1000 of the Hungarians who brought the seeds of this plant here, stuck to the hooves of their horses. A plant that produces only leaves one year, then, the following year, in springtime, it flowers. In autumn, its fruit ripens, then dries out completely. Light as a feather, it comes away from the earth and, helped by its spherical shape, is carried away by the wind, rolling and rising, floating up from the ground like a desert plant. The first migrations begin. Some go, some remain. Slowly, history recounted through the marks left in the earth becomes that history which is told by large or small fragments of distant lives. The lives of those who had arrived here from the coasts of the Adriatic, of those who had crossed the mountains, ancient Veneti, Celts, Romans, the Lombard courts, and those of the powerful patriarchs of Aquileia. Tales of castles and knights, of warrior monks, of pilgrims and crusades, then Venice and the Habsburgs, the wars, the armies, alongside the lives of farmers bound to the hardness of the earth, to those stones that become walls and houses that many will have to leave, and from which many will have to migrate far away. Of these vanished worlds, memories and tales remain that the Magredi have preserved.
I used to come up to the Magredi from Cordenons every day for a month. We would leave at 9 in the morning and would arrive around 10:30 because we came on foot with the cow and cart. We brought fresh water and something to eat for the haymakers. They stayed here for 25 days to cut the grass. They'd put a sheet up as a sort of tent, and our parents would make us go under it because there weren't any trees. There were a few little trees, like that one there. But you know, being in the sun all day was hard, even for us. So they made us stay under the sheet to rest. And the men slept there at night, so they'd be ready the next morning at 3 or 4, when dawn came, to cut the grass. In the dry lands, the Magredi, we grew maize mostly, a few vines, and then wheat, rye and barley. Then, of course, in the richer soil, we grew fodder, that's alfalfa. And of all of these cereals, maize was the one we grew the most. But obviously we didn't get the amount that you would today. We had a type of maize which made a really little cob that was a deep yellow, nearly more than gold, nearly copper, and it was called Maran, the Maran variety. It made the most delicious polenta. Yes, this was a sort of maize which was grown, let's say up to the 1950s. Then, after dinner, we all went into the cowshed. It was the only warm place in the house. Why was it warm? Because the cows were there. The cows made it warm. And then, what did we do? First of all, Grandpa recited the rosary, and it was there we learnt our prayers. Because every evening, always repeating the same words, we learnt all the prayers. Then the women would knit. They would make socks, thick socks, jumpers, with wool that we'd spun. Yes, homespun, because we used to keep sheep. Since we kept sheep, the wool was spun at home. And instead the men made rakes. They made tools for work in the fields. And after, when the rosary was over, Grandpa told stories. Well, those stories were always terrible, and we children obviously were there with our eyes and mouths wide open, listening to these stories, which I can remember even to this day. Stories which didn't even make sense, but we loved listening to them.
The experts tell us that each territory is characterized by different climate and soil. Through the centuries, it led those who worked the land to cultivate and select those plants, and they were many, which were best suited to that place. Today, we call this biodiversity. Threatened by intensive crops that have also changed the natural landscape. Small farms replaced by vast fields. Single crops of corn or soya. In the Magredi, the return to the mowing of permanent meadows, to grazing, or to an organic approach to farming with old methods and varieties of crops might be the way forward in recovering and preserving the diversity and the characteristics of this special historic and natural heritage. Important issues that concern, in different ways, the entire planet. The countries which make up the European Union have understood this, and above all have understood that protecting the environment and nature is something that concerns everyone and certainly cannot be stopped by borders. They have worked, therefore, to reach a series of international agreements in order to create a system of natural, interconnecting areas rich in biodiversity. It has been called the Natura 2000 network. The core nodes of this network are the ones that Europe has called sites of community importance, natural areas identified for the conservation of habitats and of rare species, and special protection areas, created to ensure the preservation of species of nesting and migratory birds. Our region too is committed to the creation of a system of protected areas and, in addition to the parks, reserves and natural biotopes, has identified the sites of community importance and special protection areas. Within this network, the different areas are joined by what the experts call ecological corridors that can be large or small. Streams or alpine valleys, forests or permanent meadows, or even ditches or hedges. Through these corridors, it's also easier for animals to migrate or move. The Magredi are part of this network, and the region of Friuli, Venezia, Giulia has decided to implement a project here, one which Europe has approved and funded through the Life Natura program. The project includes the Cellina Magredi, the riverbed and the valley of the Mid-Tagliamento and the confluence of the Torre and the Natisone rivers. Considered for a long time just stretches of stones, arid, empty spaces, unused and thus of no value, the Magredi are becoming once more an extraordinary natural environment again. A unique environment to preserve and to live in, as in times past. Meadows to run in, and to fly kites.
Aga strassada, li peraulis, tai claps del Magreit, e quant ca la plovet. Ma dopo ogni plovuda, ancia i claps ian flori. Abasta insino glasse, parvede quans colors, ca la lagrava.
Like wasted water are the words on the stones of the Magredi. And how it rained! But after each rain, even the stones bloom. Just kneel down to see how many colors the riverbed has.
Le attività soprattutto agricole delle famiglie di una volta. Di una volta perché questa è la casa materna. Il mio nonno era nato nel 1877 e mio nonno nel 1890. E queste qua si calzavano benissimo lo stesso, perché vedi come sono fatte, sono come barchette, e dentro qua era come una scarpa ortopedica, perché chi li costruiva o dopo camminando, tu dove appoggiava il piede tuo consumava il legno e si adattava sia alla forma del piede.
Ma non era difficile costruirlo? Ah beh, un po'.
Io avrei tante robe da mostrarvi che voi...
È leggerissimo.
Adesso cominciamo a racconticolare intanto che lui lavora. Allora, per far spuntare il fieno devi fare così. La sua roggia a prendere l'acqua, si travasava sul secchio che era questo e arrivavi tranquillamente sul tratto. E qua bevevi.
Dove veniva fatto sul filo e poi si cominciava piano piano in un giorno di vento a farli volare. Sì.